Hi, I'm Mark Demian with Rathbone Group. Today, we're going to offer some guidelines and suggestions on depositions, the do's and don'ts and things to avoid when you are being deposed. About 13 suggestions here. First and foremost, tell the truth. It's the most important rule. I suppose it goes without saying. But even a small misstatement affects your credibility. And when your credibility is affected, even truthful portions of your testimony might be viewed with skepticism. So tell the truth. First rule. Second rule, it's okay not to know the answer. If that's the truth, hearkening back to rule 1. It's okay to admit not knowing. And it's almost a human nature to want to appear intelligent and knowledgeable. But I don't know and I don't recall are perfectly acceptable responses. Avoid the temptation of trying to project or looking bad by making educated guesses. Third rule, be mindful of the image you are projecting. Of course, your testimony is the most important thing that you're going to be discussing in your deposition. But how you convey yourself and what you project is just as important. You're projecting for yourself and your company. So be clear with your responses, audible, be courteous, be willing to accept responsibility and stand behind your decisions. The next rule is read documents before answering a question. When you're handed a document, even if you think you know what that document is, pause, look at it, read it. Don't just respond with what you believe it is. And ask for time to read it if you need it. And be sure you know what it is. If you've answered discovery in a case, be sure you've reviewed those discovery responses and be ready to answer them, because the chances are you'll be asked about them. The next 3 thoughts here I kind of lump together in the importance of listening. So the first thing is listen and be sure to understand the question. Pause for a moment after a question is made before you answer. Avoid blurting out a response that you believe might be the answer. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of human nature and desire to appear intelligent and knowledgeable. But don't be afraid to say, I don't understand the question, or can you clarify the question? Can you rephrase? Can you repeat it? It's not a sign of weakness. Many might think so. It's not. It's showing that you are listening and you're not going to be drawn in to making a misstatement. The next listening important point, guideline, is to listen to objections. Another good reason to pause before you answer a question is listen for an objection by your attorney, who certainly will be there with you at the deposition. And listen to his or her objection to see, it might clue you in to how to respond. So listen very carefully to any objection. And if it's something that your attorney will tell you not to answer, he or she will interject to say, not answer that. But listen to the objections. The next one is listen for assumptions of facts. And this is really the tricky one, I think, for most people who are deposed. Innocently or intentionally, some attorneys will ask you questions and want you to volunteer some information. They might ask questions that assume facts to which you might disagree. So a good example is, was the traffic heavy or light that day? Well, that assumes for only one option or 2 options there, and the answer might be somewhere in between. It doesn't account for an alternative. What you do then is just advise the attorney that you can't answer one way or the other. So listen for assumptions of facts. The next 4 guidelines I kind of lump into things to avoid. So avoid volunteering information. Yes, you want to tell your story, but don't feel compelled to add information more than the question calls for. If a simple yes or no is the answer, then provide just that response. Attorneys will routinely stare at a witness or allow for long silences after receiving an answer. And your normal behavior patterns are to fill in gaps with dialogue when there's silence. We don't like silence. So try to avoid the uncomfortable feeling by jumping in with more information. If the attorney has a question to answer, let him or her ask it. The next thing to avoid are superlatives. Saying never or always rarely helps. It really just opens yourself up to effective cross-examination of you. You kind of look a little unreasonable when you're saying never and always. So avoid superlatives. The third thing to avoid is estimates of time, speed, and distance. We're not very good at estimating these things, so they can be very difficult and often inaccurate. So don't be drawn in to making these sort of estimates unless you are very clear and sure that you've tested and examined and thought about those estimates of time, speed, and distance. Another thing to avoid. Finally, in terms of avoiding things, avoid arguing with an attorney. Nothing's gained from this. Some attorneys really just want to gain information and be cordial. Some attorneys will be aggressive and accusatory. Those attorneys want you to lose your cool, lose your professional demeanor and character, and make a careless misstatement. So don't be drawn into that behavior. Don't let that behavior deter you from being the true professional. The last 2 pointers here are correcting errors or mistakes. Don't be afraid to correct a mistake. If you believe you've made a mistake during the deposition, correct it right away. Ask for a pause. Say, I think I made a mistake there and I want to correct myself. It's okay to do that. And you also will have the opportunity to correct enemies and mistakes later. If the deposition is transcribed, it'll be presented to you for review. You can correct yourself at those moments. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just be ready to correct them. Consulting with others. This is something that really gets people nervous. Don't be afraid of the question that says, what have you done in preparation today? Or have you met with your attorney or counsel or consulted with anyone in advance of your deposition today? Don't be guarded or defensive. It's perfectly natural. Frankly, I think it's normal to have talked with family, friends, colleagues, and your attorney. It shows that your testimony means something to you and that you're ready and you're prepared. But in those instances, be careful not to reveal the content of your conversation with your attorney that you had. That's privileged, and your attorney should be there to make sure that you don't answer that question. So that's it. Those are our thoughts on guidelines and rules for deposition. Thanks for watching. I'm Demian with Rathbone Group, and that's along and toward it.